Alright guys, so let's talk about France today because the country is in panic. Like Macron in the video, the economy also seems to be facing the wrong direction. Macron just called for a snap election and this has big consequences. The threat of course is Le Pen's far-right party. But there's a reason why the national rally is winning. And that's because the French economy is in chaos and Macron's Ukraine adventure is threatening boots on the ground. So you can understand the anger and the fear people in France have. And let's take a look at the economic and geopolitics of this. We are on the brink of a big shakeup. Policies towards Russia might take a dramatic turn that would horrify the EU. Firstly, France's debt crisis is about to get worse. Under Macron, France saw a downgrade by the ratings agency S&P. They are simply spending too much. Their credit rating took a big hit. It dropped from AA to AA minus. And this means for France, borrowing money will cost more. Even Apple has a higher credit score than Paris. And why is this happening? We are starting to see the economic effects of sanctions on Russia backfiring. Higher energy prices are hitting the budgets of EU governments. It is pushing their debt to extreme levels, and this situation has boomeranged back to Macron's government. To shield consumers from higher energy prices, the government had to absorb the cost, and this caused French debt to climb to 3 trillion euros. That's over 100% of GDP. This also pushes the deficit to 5.5% of total economic output, and this makes it the worst in the entire EU. The only path forward is austerity to make budget cutbacks. People's standard of living is gonna decrease dramatically. It's important we understand Le Pen's position on all these sanctions. It is in direct contradiction to Macron. She said many times that the energy sanctions won't work, that it serves no purpose other than to make the people of Europe suffer. She also mentioned how these are sanctions on the French people. And the numbers kind of prove she was right. The longer the conflict drags on, the longer the pain for the French economy. Macron calling for this snap election is just one big gamble. It's an ultimatum to the entire of France and a trap for Le Pen. Now, if he wins, he hopes to sideline the national rally. Now, if Le Pen wins, Macron can play the blame game. He's betting the new government will crumble under the pressure of running France. They will have to run public works, education, grow employment, the whole gamut. Everything will be on Le Pen, and this uncertainty is already wrecking the French economy. Bond yields are now back to a 2024 high, hitting 3.2% on French debt. Investors are terrified of this snap election and what might follow. This is horrific because spending in France isn't coming down. Macron is still 100% committed to Project Ukraine. This year alone, France has pledged up to 3 billion euros to help Ukraine fight the Russians. And where is the money going to come from? Obviously, it will have to be borrowed from investors at a much higher interest rate today. And this feeds into the deficit even more. And it gets worse. Macron wants to send fighter jets and instructors to Ukraine, essentially put boots on the ground. And this is going to escalate things even further. Le Pen, of course, took this as a talking point and ripped into Macron. She's heavily opposed to sending any French troops into the conflict.
La guerre, c'est ce qui peut arriver de pire à un peuple et à un pays. Et moi, je suis frappé de la légèreté avec laquelle Emmanuel Macron
La
dit...
légèreté?
Oui, la légèreté, oui. Quand un verre de whisky à la main, on dit à un chanteur avec lequel on discute à 3 heures du matin, je vais être obligé d'envoyer des gars à Odessa, oui. Je parle de légèreté, car il s'agit de la vie
L'Élysée n'a pas
de nos
confirmé
soldats.
ces propos qui ont été
Oui, bien sûr.
rapportés.
Donc, il veut envoyer des troupes pour une question d'ego, d'image personnelle.
And if you're a French voter and you want de-escalation, it's kind of obvious who you will vote for. It's not rocket science here. Macron calling for this snap election is essentially a show hand at a poker table. But chances are he might end up like Jacques Chirac back in 97. He could lose and end up working with the far right. And this snap election is about maintaining momentum. It's a showdown between Macron and Le Pen. And if he doesn't trap the NR today, Le Pen will checkmate him down the road. However, as it stands, the situation isn't good for Macron at all. And if I was a betting man, I'd wager he's gonna lose. According to the polls, it's a landslide. Le Pen is leading with 34% of voters, while Macron has only 19% of the votes. This is a very big disparity. If it continues in 2027, France might get their first female president. Macron has said he won't resign if Le Pen wins, but it really doesn't matter at this point. The French government will be in a deadlock. Passing new laws will be quite impossible. The Prime Minister Attal will also be gone, and that is going to affect the entire French economy. The situation in France isn't unique. We'll see this play out in other elections, especially in Germany. This is a accumulation of all the wrong economic decisions. This is going to wreck the EU as a whole. Since Macron called for the elections, we can see a disaster in the markets. French stocks collapsed, bond yields are heading up, the euro has also fallen against the dollar. And these are signs that trust in Europe is evaporating. There's this panic surrounding the far right and what it means for the economy. We could conceivably get into a least trust moment where the French bond market actually collapses, where investors believe French debt is toxic and bond yields fly to the moon. Just like in the US, bond yields soaring affects literally everything. Banks invested in French bonds could suffer terrible losses, and if banks start collapsing, this could plunge Europe into a full-blown economic crisis. When Macron called for the election, investors panicked. They fled French debt and went to German bonds instead. The spread between the French and German bonds diverged tremendously. If or when Le Pen wins, we can expect another spike up just from the shock of it all. More investors will dump French bonds and head elsewhere. Stocks in French banks will also roll over. And this is what happens when trust is gone. Obviously, this won't be good for the people. The pension system might be affected, and that would greatly hit people's standard of living. And it's not just France at risk. Olaf Scholz is also facing election problems in Germany. His party, the SPD, is projected to win only 14% of the votes. The rest of his coalition, the Greens and the Free Democrats, did even worse, 12% and 4.9%. If the right gains more ground next year, there could be a similar panic out of Germany. Money could leave the country and cause yet another economic crisis. Europe as a whole is fracturing. Immigration is a very big issue, but so is foreign policy and the economic war against Russia. So what will happen if the National Rally wins? Will Project Ukraine still continue, at least on the French side? Well, the EU might be in for a very big shock.
Est-ce que vous croyez que l'Occident a mécompris président Poutine?
Non, je crois que l'ancienne administration américaine, en réalité, a mis le mur de Berlin sur roulette pour le disposer aux frontières de la Russie. Donc c'était l'intérêt des États-Unis. Est-ce que c'était l'intérêt des pays de l'Union européenne? La réponse est non. Voilà, nous n'avons aucune raison de mener une nouvelle forme de guerre froide à la Russie. Aucune raison.
Mais en effet, la sphère de l'influence de la Russie, ça veut augmenter un peu. Les pays baltes aussi.
Si vous voulez, on a pris des accords avec la Russie à la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale et ces accords, ils ont été brisés puisque les États-Unis n'ont eu de cesse depuis un certain nombre d'années, au travers de l'OTAN, de militariser la frontière, les pays qui sont à la frontière de la Russie. Donc ça a été ressenti, je pense, par la Russie comme une forme d'hostilité. Et moi, je ne suis pas pour la montée comme ça des conflits, la montée de l'hostilité, la vision belliciste. Je crois que ce sont des provocations qui entraînent évidemment une réaction. Bon. L'Ukraine fait partie de la zone d'influence russe. C'est un fait. Comme le Canada fait partie de la zone d'influence américaine.
Now, it's very possible that Le Pen could break with the EU when it comes to Russia. Agreements on sanctions might get difficult if France does a U-turn on foreign policy. Support for Ukraine from the second largest EU economy could drain away, and this will make it even harder for Europe to raise more money in the future. And if you think this is a stretch, wait until you hear her ideas about the EU and NATO. In foreign policy, she's beginning to sound really like Donald Trump.
Quel devrait être l'engagement de la France envers l'OTAN?
Moi, je souhaite que la France sorte du commandement intégré de l'OTAN. Parce que l'OTAN a été créée précisément pour lutter contre l'URSS. Aujourd'hui, il n'y a plus d'URSS. Ce que je note, c'est que le gouvernement de Vladimir Poutine doit au moins assez plaire aux Russes pour qu'il soit réélu régulièrement dans son propre pays dans le cadre des élections. Donc, que vous dire de plus?
Et si vous gagnez, madame, alors ça présage le commencement de la fin de l'Union européenne.
Mais l'Union européenne est presque déjà finie, pardon. Enfin, moi, je ne viens que dire, plutôt que d'attendre l'effondrement de l'Union européenne dans le chaos, je vous propose d'organiser sa transformation en Europe des nations.
No doubt, what she's saying will be shocking to Brussels. A President Le Pen could trigger chaos in the EU coalition. The breakdown of the Eurozone economies and governments might be something Russia factored into the equation. You drag the war for as long as possible and you ramp up the economic attrition. Or this could be just a natural consequence of all the bad decisions made over the past 2 years or maybe even the past 10 years. Either way, Europe will never be the same again. But as always, let me know what you think. Will Le Pen's party snatch the elections? Or will Macron win his big gamble? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.